My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old, and if you had met me just a few years ago, you probably would have said I was one of the lucky ones. I had what looked like the American dream. I was newly married, we had a beautiful baby boy, and my husband and I had just moved into a house that, at the time, I believed was ours. A 2-story home with a porch swing, the kind of place I had pictured since I was a little girl doodling dream houses in my school notebooks. When I stood on that porch, holding my son for the first time after moving in, I thought, this is it. This is the life I always wanted. But even in those early days, when everything was supposed to feel perfect, there were shadows I chose to ignore. From the very beginning, my mother-in-law had a way of inserting herself into every decision, no matter how personal or small. What color curtains went in the living room, how I should swaddle my baby, even the way I seasoned food. She never asked, she told. Emily, the baby will catch a cold if you let him wear that. Or, Emily, my son likes his coffee made this way. At first I smiled, nodded, and told myself it was harmless. After all, she had raised the man I married. Maybe this was just her way of showing love. But love doesn't usually come packaged as constant correction. Looking back, I see the signs clearly. The way my husband Daniel would always add, "Mom just knows best. Don't take it personally." He said it so many times it became a reflex. I remember standing in our brand new kitchen, holding a spoon in my hand, trying not to cry, because every single thing I did felt like it had to be approved. If I suggested something, anything, Daniel would pause, hesitate, and then say, "Let me check with Mom first." It was like I had married into not just a family, but into a system where his mother's word was law and mine was optional. Still, I tried to push those feelings aside. I told myself it would get better once we settled into the house, once the baby got older, once Daniel realized I was capable of making decisions on my own. I didn't want to be the nagging wife who constantly complains about her mother-in-law. So I swallowed the frustration. I laughed off her comments at Sunday dinners. I forced myself to stay quiet when she rearranged my kitchen cabinets, the proper way, and I kept repeating a silent mantra in my head. She's just trying to help. She means well. Don't make waves. For a while, I convinced myself it was working. On the outside, we looked like the picture of stability. I'd post smiling photos of our son's first steps, birthday candles, holiday mornings in front of the tree. My friends would comment, "You're so lucky, Emily. You have it all." And I'd smile at their words, even as I sat up at night in the glow of the baby monitor, wondering why I felt like a guest in my own home. I didn't know then that those uneasy feelings, the tightening in my chest whenever paperwork appeared on the table, the way Daniel avoided looking me in the eye when his mother spoke for him, were warning signs, warnings of something much bigger, something I never could have imagined. Back then, I was still naive enough to believe that the house we bought together was ours, that the vows Daniel made to me on our wedding day mattered more than his mother's opinions. That family was supposed to mean safety, not control. But the truth was already woven into the walls of that house, hidden in signatures I hadn't read closely enough, and in whispers between mother and son that always stopped when I entered the room. At that moment, I was living in what I thought was the beginning of a lifelong dream. I had no idea I was standing at the edge of a nightmare. Daniel came home one evening with a folder under his arm. He was unusually cheerful, the kind of cheerfulness he had whenever he wanted me to agree to something without asking too many questions. I remember I was in the kitchen, rocking our son in his high chair, spooning pureed carrots into his tiny mouth while trying to keep him from tossing half of it onto the floor. Daniel placed the folder on the counter with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Em," he said, using the nickname he always used when he wanted to sound extra affectionate. "There's just a couple of forms we need to sign." "Nothing major. It's for the house. Mom already looked them over." That last sentence should have been a red flag. Mom already looked them over, but at the time, I was exhausted, distracted, and desperate for peace. So I wiped carrot puree off my son's cheek and asked, "What kind of forms?" Daniel kissed the top of my head like he always did when he wanted to disarm me. "It's just to make things easier with the bank. You know how complicated mortgages are. This way we get a better rate, less hassle with taxes. Totally standard stuff. Honestly, it's boring paperwork. Mom even said she handled something similar for her friend once. I should have stopped right there. I should have asked to read every page, to take it to my own lawyer, to give myself time. But instead, I let his calm tone wash over me. I glanced at the stack of papers, dense with legal jargon and fine print, and felt my energy drain away. Our baby started fussing again, demanding my attention. And so, with one hand holding a spoon and the other holding a pen, I signed where Daniel pointed. I remember him saying, "See? Easy. You don't have to worry about anything, Em. I'll take care of it. Mom's helping us, like always helping." That word burned in the back of my mind. Over the next few weeks, I noticed little shifts. Subtle things at first, almost invisible unless you were looking for them. The bills no longer came addressed to me and Daniel. They were sent to his mother's name. The property tax reminder didn't list me as co-owner. When mail came from the bank, Daniel would scoop it up quickly and tuck it away before I could even glance at it. I asked him once, casually, "Why does everything have your mom's name on it now?" He gave a rehearsed chuckle. "That's just how they process things. She co-signed to make the loan stronger. It's temporary. Don't stress about it, temporary." That word stuck to me like a burr. The strangest part was how his mother suddenly acted more emboldened than before. She began referring to the house as my property. At first I thought she was joking. She would laugh and say, "Well, in my house I don't allow shoes in the living room." Or, "When guests come over to my house they'll expect a proper dinner." The first few times I forced a polite smile. But inside, I felt something tighten in my chest. "Your house?" I wanted to scream. This was supposed to be our home, mine and Daniel's, the place where our son would grow up. And yet, every time she said it, Daniel just smiled as if it were normal, as if she had earned the right to call it hers. The moment that still haunts me happened one Saturday afternoon. I was folding laundry in the living room when I overheard her speaking to a neighbor at the door. She said, clear as day, "Yes, this is my house. My son and his wife are just staying here while they get on their feet. Just staying here." My knees nearly buckled when I heard that. Because in that moment, the truth slammed into me. I had signed something without knowing what it truly meant. And now, without even realizing it, I was no longer the owner of the place I called home. That night, I confronted Daniel. I asked him directly, "What exactly did I sign? Why does your mother talk like she owns this house?" He sighed, rubbed his temples, and avoided my gaze. "Em, you're overthinking. It's just legal language. The bank needed security, and Mom stepped in. It's better this way. Stop making a big deal out of everything." But it was a big deal. It was the biggest deal of my life. I just didn't understand how dangerous it really was. Not yet. All I knew in that moment was that something fragile inside me had cracked. The home I thought was mine no longer felt safe. The man I thought was my partner no longer felt like he was on my side. And the woman who called herself Mom was slowly revealing the true extent of her control. I told myself I could endure it, that it was only temporary, that eventually Daniel would realize how unfair it all was. But deep down, some quiet, trembling part of me already knew. The foundation of my life had been stolen right out from under me, and I had helped them do it with my own signature. The strangest thing about losing something isn't always the moment it's taken from you. Sometimes it's the quiet days afterward, when you realize the loss has seeped into every corner of your life. That's what it felt like in my own home. One day I was decorating the nursery, hanging pastel curtains I had picked out myself, and the next I felt like a guest, carefully tiptoeing around a space that no longer belonged to me. It began gradually, like water filling a glass drop by drop. My mother-in-law, Margaret, no longer treated the house as ours. She treated it as hers. And Daniel, he let her. I'd come downstairs in the morning to find her in the kitchen, already cooking breakfast, moving my pots and pans around like they were misplaced. "Emily," she'd say with that sweet, sharp tone only she could manage. I reorganized your spice rack. Honestly, it was such a mess. I don't know how you ever found anything. The first time, I laughed awkwardly. I liked it the way it was. She didn't even look up from the pan. You'll get used to this system. It's more efficient. Trust me, and that was the pattern. I would push back, she would bulldoze, and Daniel would shrug. He'd say, "Mom means well. Don't start a fight over something so small." But it wasn't small. It was constant. She dictated where the furniture went, what kind of food was appropriate for the baby, even what curtains belonged in the living room. She insisted on buying heavy, dark drapes that clashed with the bright colors I had chosen. Light fades fabric, she explained matter-of-factly, while Daniel nodded in agreement. And so, the room that had once felt like mine turned into something out of her catalog, heavy and cold. I'll never forget the night she stormed into the nursery. Lucas, our baby, had been crying for almost an hour. I was exhausted, pacing the room, whispering lullabies, trying everything I knew to calm him. Suddenly the door burst open, and there she was, arms folded, disapproval etched into every line of her face. "You're doing it wrong," she announced. I froze. "Excuse me?" She marched over, lifted Lucas from my arms like I was just a babysitter who couldn't handle her shift, and bounced him on her hip. "You're too soft with him. Babies need firmness, routine, not coddling. No wonder he cries so much." Her words cut straight into me. I wanted to scream, to snatch my baby back, to tell her that I was his mother, not her. But Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, and instead of standing up for me, he sighed and said, "Mom's right, Em. Maybe you should try her way." It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. In that moment, I wasn't a wife or a mother. I was just an inconvenience, someone tolerated in her house. From then on, she treated me less like a partner in this family, and more like a guest overstaying her welcome. She would invite people over, her friends, her relatives, without even asking me. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from grocery shopping to find a group of women sitting in my living room, sipping tea and chatting about renovations. "Oh, Emily," she said as if I were a stranger walking in. "We were just discussing the possibility of turning the guest room into a proper office for Daniel. Don't you think that would be better use of the space?" Before I could respond, Daniel chimed in. "That's not a bad idea, Mom." I stood there, clutching the grocery bags, realizing that the decisions about this house were being made without me, in front of me. Even the way she referred to the place shifted. At first it was subtle. "In my house we do this, in my house we do that." But soon the mask dropped entirely. When guests came, she proudly declared, "Welcome to my home," as if I didn't even exist. I remember overhearing a conversation between her and one of Daniel's uncles. He asked how the house buying process had gone. She leaned in, lowered her voice just enough to sound intimate but not enough for me to miss, and said, "Well, technically it's in my name. I wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. You know how young people are? They don't always think things through." I wanted to storm in and shout that it wasn't true, that I had been part of every decision, that I had sacrificed to make that house a home. But deep down, I knew she wasn't lying. Not anymore. On paper, it was her house. My signature had given her that power, and now she wielded it like a weapon. The worst part wasn't even the control. It was the way Daniel slowly began to mirror her. When I suggested family traditions, baking cookies for Christmas, planting flowers in the yard, he dismissed them. "That's not how Mom does it," he'd say. If I protested, he accused me of being dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in on me. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every word spoken seemed to remind me, "This isn't yours anymore." At night, when Lucas finally slept, I'd sit by the window and stare at the porch light outside, remembering the day we moved in. I had thought it was the start of a dream, but now it felt like a cage, a place where I wasn't the wife or the mother, just a tolerated outsider under Margaret's watchful eye. I told myself that it couldn't last forever, that eventually Daniel would see how toxic it had become, that he would choose me, choose our son, choose the family we were supposed to be building together. But I was wrong, because Margaret wasn't just settling into control. She was preparing for something much bigger, and soon she wouldn't just make me feel like a guest. She would make it clear that in her house I didn't belong at all. If the early months felt like living under someone else's rules, then this was the moment I realized those rules weren't just suggestions, they were weapons. It happened on an evening that should have been ordinary. Lucas had just turned 1, and like most toddlers, he had started developing a sweet tooth. I was in the kitchen, slicing strawberries into small pieces, when Margaret walked in with a slice of frosted cake balanced on a plate. "Lucas should try this," she announced. I frowned. "He's too young for that much sugar." "The doctor said," she waved her hand, cutting me off. "Doctors always exaggerate. A little cake won't hurt him. When Daniel was his age, I gave him sweets all the time." I set the knife down firmly. "That might have worked for Daniel, but I'm not giving this to Lucas. He's my son, and I make those decisions." Her eyes narrowed, the warmth in her voice vanishing. "My house, my rules." Those words hit like a slap. My house. She said it so casually, but I could feel the venom under the surface. I shook my head. "It may be your name on the papers, but this is supposed to be my family's home. You don't get to override me as his mother." Daniel entered the kitchen just in time to hear the last part. He looked between us, exasperated, like we were two children fighting over a toy. "What now?" he sighed. I turned to him, desperate for support. "She's trying to give Lucas cake. He's too young." I told her no. Instead of backing me, Daniel rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Mom's just trying to help." "It's not worth the fight, Em. Let him have a taste." The betrayal in those words made my chest tighten. I stared at him, searching his face for even a flicker of loyalty, but there was nothing. Just blind obedience to the woman who had raised him. Margaret smirked, triumphant. She placed the plate on the counter and crossed her arms. "You see? Daniel understands. You're the one always making things difficult. Maybe motherhood isn't suited for you after all." My breath caught in my throat. "Excuse me?" She leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "You coddle him. You're raising him to be weak. Daniel and I talk about it all the time. That boy cries too much, clings too much. He needs discipline, not your constant pampering." It felt like she had ripped the floor out from under me. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Lucas waddled into the kitchen, tugging at my leg, his innocent eyes glancing between us. Margaret bent down to him with a smile that felt more like a mask than genuine affection. "Come here, sweetheart. Grandma will always take care of you, even when your mommy doesn't know how." That was it. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Don't you dare undermine me in front of my child," I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. "I am his mother, not you." The air turned thick with tension. Daniel stepped forward, holding his hands up. "Stop it, both of you. You're making a scene," but Margaret didn't stop. She straightened, her eyes blazing, and pointed toward the door. "If you can't respect the way things are in this house, Emily, maybe you don't belong here at all." The room went silent. Even Lucas stopped fussing, as if he understood the weight of her words. I stared at her, stunned. "Are you saying you want me gone?" She didn't blink. "I'm saying this is my home, and I won't have you disrespecting me under my own roof. You're lucky I've tolerated this long. If you can't accept how things are, then yes, maybe it's time you left." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I looked at Daniel, praying he would say something, anything, to stop this madness. He opened his mouth, hesitated, and then said the words that would change everything. "Em, maybe it would be better if you cooled off somewhere else for a while." Just until things settled down, I felt my knees weaken. "Are you serious? You're siding with her?" He avoided my eyes, staring at the floor. "I don't want conflict. I just think, maybe Mom's right. Maybe we all need space. That was the word he used, as if kicking me out of my own life was the same thing as taking a weekend vacation. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I couldn't let Margaret see me break. She was watching me with satisfaction, her lips curled in a faint smile. I could almost hear her thoughts. I've won. I gathered Lucas in my arms, his tiny hands clutching at my shirt, sensing my distress. My voice shook as I whispered, "You'll regret this." Not to her, not even to Daniel, but to the universe, to anyone listening. Because I knew, deep down, this was no longer about cake or rules or even the house. This was war. That night, I packed a small bag for me and Lucas. Just the essentials. Diapers, clothes, his favorite stuffed animal, Dow. Daniel didn't stop me. He didn't hold me, didn't ask me to stay. He stood in the doorway, silent, while Margaret hovered behind him, arms crossed like a queen watching her rival finally retreat. As I stepped out into the cool night air, Lucas asleep against my shoulder, I looked back at the house one last time. The porch light glowed softly, the same light I once thought meant safety, home, family. Now it looked cold, foreign, hostile. I told myself this wasn't the end, that I'd be back, that somehow I'd take back what was stolen. But at that moment, with my child in my arms and my heart shattered in my chest, all I knew was this. I had lost the battle, and Margaret wanted me to believe I had lost the war. People talk about heartbreak like it's a single event, one shattering blow that breaks you apart. But for me, heartbreak was slower, heavier. It was waking up in a place that wasn't home, staring at unfamiliar walls, and realizing my entire life had been ripped away overnight. After Margaret threw me out, I ended up in a tiny apartment across town. A friend from college had a spare unit above her garage and offered it to me for cheap. It wasn't much. A single bedroom, peeling paint, the constant hum of traffic outside the window. But it was safe. Or at least safer than the house I had just been exiled from. I remember the first morning there. Lucas woke up confused, blinking at the cracked ceiling above him. He reached for the familiar stuffed bunny he always slept with and asked in his soft, drowsy voice, "Home?" My throat tightened. I forced a smile and said, "Yes, baby?" This is home now, but the word tasted like ash in my mouth. The hardest part wasn't the lack of space, or the noise, or the bare walls. It was the silence from Daniel. The man who had vowed to love and protect me didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at the door asking me to come back. Days turned into weeks, and the only messages I got were from Margaret. Sharp, clipped voicemails reminding me that Lucas needed stability and that if I couldn't provide it, she and Daniel would. Each message felt like a knife. She wasn't just threatening me. She was hinting at something darker, that she might try to take my son away. I started noticing the little ways she tried to undermine me even from a distance. At Lucas's daycare, one of the teachers casually mentioned that Grandma said you were having trouble adjusting. At the grocery store, a neighbor of Margaret's asked if it was true I had walked out on my marriage. The rumors spread like wildfire, carefully planted seeds from a woman who knew exactly how to turn a community against me. I felt trapped in a story she was writing, one where I was cast as the irresponsible mother, the ungrateful wife, the outsider who didn't deserve her place. But the worst betrayal came not from Margaret, it came from Daniel. One afternoon, I opened my email and found a message from the bank addressed to him, but accidentally forwarded to me. At first, I thought it was just another bill, but when I opened the attachment, my hands began to shake. It was a notice about the mortgage, except my name wasn't anywhere on it. The only names listed were Daniel's and Margaret's. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. When did this happen? How did my name disappear? That night, I dug through the folder of papers I had brought with me when I left. Insurance forms, copies of our lease from years ago, even a few scattered bills. Buried among them was a photocopy of the document I had signed months earlier, the one Daniel had handed me so casually in the kitchen. For the first time, I read it carefully. Line after line of dense legal jargon, words that twisted my stomach into knots, and then, clear as day, the phrase that sealed my fate. Transfer of property rights. I had signed away the house. not to Daniel. Not to both of us, but solely to Margaret. My breath caught in my throat. I sat there at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room, and I realized that everything I had believed was a lie. The home I had decorated, the nursery I had painted, the backyard where I imagined Lucas playing. None of it had ever been mine. It was hers. It had always been hers. The betrayal was so sharp, so suffocating, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. I thought back to Daniel's soft smile, his reassuring tone. "It's just a formality, Em. Don't worry about it." But it wasn't just a formality. It was a trap. I wanted to scream, to tear the paper into shreds, to run back to that house and demand answers. But instead, I sat there in silence, my hands trembling as Lucas toddled over and placed his chubby little hand on mine. His wide brown eyes stared at me, full of innocence, completely unaware of the storm crashing down around us. "Mommy sad?" he asked softly. My heart shattered all over again. I forced a shaky smile and pulled him into my lap. "No, baby. Mommy's just thinking." But the truth was clear. I wasn't just sad. I was furious. And for the first time since leaving, that fury started to burn hotter than my despair. Because this wasn't just about being pushed out of a house. This was about being betrayed by the man I married, manipulated by the woman who claimed to be family, and stripped of everything I thought I had built. I had been cast out, humiliated, lied to. And I knew one thing for certain. Margaret thought she had won. Daniel thought he had chosen the safe side. But they had underestimated me. Because a mother fighting for her child, for her future, doesn't stay down forever. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Grief is loud. It crashes over you in waves, crying into pillows, slamming doors, screaming into the void. But survival is quiet. It creeps in after the tears dry, after the heartbreak dulls, and whispers in your ear, "You can't let them win." That whisper became my companion in those weeks after I discovered the truth about the papers. Every night, after Lucas was asleep, I sat at the wobbly kitchen table in my little apartment and combed through documents, piecing together the puzzle I had once been too blind, or too trusting, to see. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Margaret hadn't just manipulated me into signing over the house. She had been orchestrating this for months, maybe years. The loan was in her name. The taxes were redirected to her address. The insurance policy listed her as the primary beneficiary. It was as if I had been erased. Daniel, meanwhile, was slipping further away. On the rare occasions we spoke, his voice was detached, almost rehearsed. He'd ask about Lucas, not out of love, but obligation. "Is he eating well? How's his sleep? Always quick? Always surface level?" Never once did he ask about me. One night, after Lucas was asleep, Daniel showed up at my apartment unannounced. He stood in the doorway, his expensive watch glinting under the dim porch light, his posture tense. "Emily," he said, his tone clipped. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what? Or should I say who? You or your mother?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose like he was already tired of me. "This hostility isn't helping anyone. Mom is worried. She says you're trying to turn Lucas against us." The audacity of those words nearly knocked the breath out of me. Against us. As if I was the outsider. As if Lucas wasn't my flesh and blood. I steadied my voice. "I'm not turning him against anyone. He sees what's happening. He's not stupid." Daniel's eyes flickered, a trace of guilt. But then it vanished. "Look, Em. Mom has stability. She can provide things you can't right now. The house, the support, I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Say it. Say what you really mean. You think I can't provide for my son because I'm not under her roof." Silence. And in that silence I heard everything he was too cowardly to say. He wasn't just standing by his mother. He was hiding behind her. I stepped closer, my voice low, controlled. "Do you even realize what she's doing, Daniel? She's not helping you. She's replacing me. She's setting you up so that one day, Lucas won't even remember who made the rules in that house. It'll be her. Always her. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue, and that told me more than words ever could. He knew. Deep down, he knew. After he left, the fury that had been simmering inside me solidified into resolve. If Daniel wouldn't stand up to her, I would. But I couldn't just storm back into that house and demand my place. Margaret thrived on control, on making me look hysterical, unstable. If I came at her with anger, she'd twist it, use it as proof that I was unfit. If I wanted to win, I had to be smarter, quieter. So I started gathering evidence, emails, bank statements, daycare notes, anything that proved she was interfering, undermining me, manipulating the narrative. I kept a journal, writing down every encounter, every whispered comment, every time Lucas came home parroting her words instead of mine. At first it felt futile, like scribbling into a void. But then, little by little, patterns began to emerge. One night, while sifting through old files, I stumbled across something unexpected. A property record from years ago. It showed the original deed to the house, signed only by Daniel, which meant the transfer to Margaret wasn't about helping us get a better rate. It was about consolidating everything under her name. Step by step, she had been stripping Daniel of control too. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just about me. Margaret wasn't protecting her son. She was controlling him, binding him with the same chains she had used on me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself before. Pity for Daniel. He was weak, yes, a coward. But he was also her victim. She had molded him into a man who couldn't make a move without her approval, but pity didn't erase betrayal, and it wouldn't win me back my life. What it did give me, though, was clarity. Margaret's power wasn't invincible. It depended on secrecy, on keeping everyone, Daniel, the neighbors, even me, convinced she was the savior, not the saboteur. If I could expose her, if I could show the truth, the carefully constructed facade would crack. I looked at Lucas, asleep in his small bed, his tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. He was the reason I couldn't give up. He was the reason I had to fight smart, not desperate. I leaned down, kissed his forehead, and whispered a promise into the dark. They may have stolen the house. They may have stolen your father. But they will not steal us. I will not let them. And for the first time since walking out of that glowing porch light, I felt it. Not despair, not anger, but the quiet, unshakable spark of defiance. The fight wasn't loud, not yet. But it had begun. Defiance is a powerful thing, but it doesn't pay the rent. It doesn't keep the lights on, or cover daycare bills, or buy groceries. For weeks, I juggled work, Lucas, and the crushing weight of survival, all while Margaret flaunted her power from a distance. But defiance planted a seed, and that seed was growing. One morning, after dropping Lucas off at daycare, I walked into a small law office tucked between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy. The brass plaque on the door read, Anderson and Clark, Family Law Specialists. I had hesitated for days before making the appointment, terrified of what it might cost, terrified of how Margaret would retaliate if she found out. But as I sat across from the attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Clark, I realized I couldn't keep fighting this war alone. Rebecca adjusted her glasses and flipped through the papers I had brought. So let me get this straight, she said. Your husband convinced you to sign over property rights, and now everything is in your mother-in-law's name? I nodded, heat rushing to my cheeks. Saying it out loud made me feel foolish, weak. Rebecca looked up, her expression softening. Emily, don't blame yourself. What you're describing is classic coercion. You trusted him. You trusted her. And they exploited that trust. That doesn't make you weak. That makes them manipulative. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. Can I get it back? The house? My rights? Rebecca hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's complicated, On paper, it looks like you willingly signed. Undoing that isn't easy, but... She tapped the papers. If we can prove manipulation, undue influence, or fraud, we might have a case. Fraud. The word lit a fire in my chest. I leaned forward. What do you need from me? Everything, she replied. Emails, texts, witnesses, anything that shows a pattern, her undermining you, your husband pressuring you, her inserting herself into your life and decisions. The courts look at more than just signatures. They look at intent, at context. For the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't despair. Hope. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I pulled out my journal, my folders, the screenshots I had saved. I wrote late into the night, documenting everything. Margaret's words, Daniel's evasions, the rumors, the threats, the way Lucas came home parroting her authority. Each entry felt like a weapon forged, one I could eventually bring into battle. But as I dug deeper, something strange happened. While searching for an old bank statement, I stumbled across a letter addressed to Margaret. It wasn't just a bill or notice. It was from a collections agency. The words overdue balance were printed in bold. Curiosity burned through me. I searched again, more carefully, and what I uncovered nearly knocked me out of my chair. Margaret wasn't the financial savior she pretended to be. She was drowning in debt, credit cards, medical bills, even a second mortgage on another property. My mind spun. How could she own everything, yet owe so much? And then the chilling realization hit. She hadn't taken the house to protect Daniel or me. She had taken it to shield herself, to use it as leverage, collateral, proof of assets she didn't really have. I sat back, trembling. All this time I thought she wanted control over me, but the truth was uglier. She needed the house to save herself, and she had manipulated Daniel, her own son, into helping her do it. The betrayal cut even deeper. Because it meant Daniel hadn't just chosen her over me out of loyalty. He had chosen her because she had lied to him too. For a moment I felt dizzy, caught between fury and disbelief. But then something inside me shifted. This was her weakness. She had built her empire of control on a rotten foundation. And if I could expose it, everything she had stolen from me could come crashing down. The next day I slid the copies of those debt letters across Rebecca's desk. Her eyebrows shot up. Well, well. Looks like your mother-in-law isn't as invincible as she pretends. What does it mean? I asked, my voice trembling with cautious hope. It means, Rebecca said slowly, a smile tugging at her lips, that she may not be fit to control anything. If she's using assets to hide debt, if she coerced you to sign under false pretenses, this changes everything. This isn't just family drama, Emily. This is legal fraud. I left the office that day with my chest lighter than it had been in months. The war wasn't over. Margaret still had the house, Daniel still stood in her shadow, and my reputation was still smeared. But for the first time I had ammunition, and Margaret didn't know it yet. Secrets have a way of poisoning the air around them. Once you've uncovered one, you can't look at anything the same. That's how it felt after I found Margaret's debt letters. Every smile she gave, every word she spoke, every gesture of kindness, I could see the rot beneath it. And the person who needed to see it most was Daniel. I arranged to meet him at a coffee shop, neutral ground, somewhere Margaret couldn't lurk behind him, whispering into his ear. He arrived late, as always, dressed in his neatly pressed shirt and polished shoes, a man who looked put together on the outside but carried storm clouds in his eyes. He slid into the booth across from me. What's this about? I don't have a lot of time, I studied him, searching for the man I once loved, the man I thought I was building a future with. All I saw was a puppet, his strings pulled by someone else. So I reached into my bag and slid the copies of the debt letters across the table. Read. He frowned, picking them up reluctantly. As his eyes scanned the pages, the color drained from his face. His lips parted, but no words came. He read the first page, then the second, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, he whispered, "Where did you get these?" They were mailed to her. She left them in with some of our old paperwork. My voice was steady, cold. She's drowning in debt, Daniel. Credit cards, loans, medical bills. And guess what she used to cover herself? He swallowed hard. The house. I nodded slowly. The house. The house I signed away because you told me it was just a formality. The house she convinced you was safe, under her name. You didn't save me, Daniel. You didn't even save yourself. You saved her. He ran a hand over his face, his facade cracking. For the first time in months, he looked less like Margaret's polished son, and more like a lost boy who had no idea which way was up. I didn't know. His voice broke slightly. She told me it was to protect us. That she was helping us. I cut him off sharply. You thought wrong. You didn't check. You didn't question. You just handed her the power, and you let her strip me of mine. He sat in silence, staring down at the letters as if they might bite him. The truth was too loud to ignore now. I leaned in, my voice low, but fierce. Do you see it now? She doesn't want to help us. She doesn't care about our marriage or Lucas or what's best for anyone but herself. She took everything because she needed it. And you, I jabbed a finger toward him. You were too blind to see she was using you. His jaw clenched. He wanted to argue. I could see it. But the evidence lay between us, undeniable. Finally, he muttered, "What do you want me to do?" The question landed like a slap. After everything, after the betrayal, the lies, the humiliation, he still couldn't think for himself. He was waiting for me to tell him what to do, like a child. I sat back, exhaling slowly. What I want is irrelevant. This isn't about me anymore. It's about Lucas, and I won't let him grow up under her shadow. I won't let her poison him the way she poisoned you. For the first time, Daniel's eyes met mine without darting away. They were glassy, haunted. If this gets out, she'll lose everything. Her reputation, the business. She'll hate me. I shook my head, almost pitying him. She already doesn't love you, Daniel. Not the way a mother should. If she did, she wouldn't have used you as a pawn in her game. She doesn't see you as her son. She sees you as her insurance policy. He flinched at that, because deep down he knew it was true. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, I leaned forward again, my voice steady. I've hired a lawyer. We're building a case. If you're smart, you'll cooperate. Because when this goes to court, it won't just be about property. It'll be about manipulation, fraud, coercion. And if you're on her side, you'll go down with her. His face paled, the weight of my words sinking in. For the first time since Margaret had thrown me out, I saw it, a crack in the armor. The certainty she had built around him, the blind loyalty she demanded, it was beginning to fracture. Daniel sat back, the letters still clutched in his hands. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no, but he didn't defend her either. And that silence told me everything. I stood, gathering my bag. Think carefully, Daniel, because the tide is turning. And when it breaks, you'll have to decide which side you're on, hers or your son's. As I walked out of the coffee shop, my heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I hadn't won yet. Margaret still held the house, still held sway over Daniel, still had her claws sunk into every part of our lives. But now I had proof. I had leverage. And for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to her moves. I was making my own. The thing about people like Margaret is this. They don't crumble quietly. When their control slips, they don't reflect. They don't retreat. They strike back, harder and crueler than before. And Margaret had just realized that I was no longer the obedient daughter-in-law she could bully into silence. It started with whispers. At Lucas's daycare, one of the teachers pulled me aside, concern etched on her face. "Emily, Margaret came in yesterday. She said you've been struggling emotionally, that you might not be stable." The words made my stomach drop. Not stable. I knew exactly what she was doing, planting seeds, casting doubt, preparing the ground for the next phase of her war. Sure enough, 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. My hands shook as I opened it, scanning the bolded words at the top. Petition for custody review. She wasn't just threatening me anymore. She was trying to take my son. The petition, filed under Daniel's name but clearly written with her fingerprints all over it, claimed I was emotionally unfit, that Lucas was better off in a stable environment under the care of his father and grandmother. It listed my tiny apartment as insufficient housing, my work hours as neglectful, and even included statements from concerned neighbors, people I knew were Margaret's friends, parroting whatever lies she had fed them. My chest tightened, panic clawing at me. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war on paper, war in the eyes of the court. And in Margaret's game, perception was everything. I called Rebecca immediately. My voice shook as I explained, my words tumbling out in a rush. She listened calmly, then said, "This was predictable. She knows she's losing control, so she's trying to flip the narrative. But Emily," her voice softened, "this is where we fight the hardest." I clutched the phone, tears spilling down my cheeks. "She's trying to take my baby." "And she won't succeed," Rebecca assured me, "not if we're smart. We'll show the judge her debts, her interference, the manipulation. But Emily, you need to be strong. She's going to try to break you. Don't give her the satisfaction." That night, after Lucas was asleep, I sat alone in the dim light of my apartment, staring at the custody petition. My mind raced with every fear imaginable. Losing him, watching him grow up under her rules, hearing him call her mom instead of me. The thought made me physically sick. But as the panic threatened to consume me, I remembered the promise I had whispered to Lucas weeks earlier. They will not steal us. And suddenly, fear hardened into resolve. If she wanted a fight, she would get one. The next days blurred into a storm of preparation. Rebecca and I gathered everything, the debt letters, the journal entries, statements from friends who had witnessed Margaret undermining me. We even tracked down an old contractor who admitted Margaret had pressured him to falsify repair documents for the house. Every piece was another crack in her carefully constructed facade. But Margaret wasn't done. One evening, as I was leaving work, I found her waiting near my car. She stepped out of the shadows like a figure from a nightmare, her designer coat pristine, her lips curved in that chilling half-smile I had come to dread. "Emily," she said sweetly, though her eyes were sharp as knives, "we need to talk." I froze, gripping my keys like a weapon. There's nothing left to say. "Oh, but there is." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You think you're clever, don't you? Digging through my papers, dragging lawyers into this, but you're out of your depth. You've always been out of your depth." My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "You're terrified, Margaret. That's why you're here, because for once, you're not in control." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flash of raw fury. "If you push this, you'll regret it. I've already spoken to people. Judges, teachers, friends. They know you're unstable. They know Lucas needs me more than you." The venom in her words made my skin crawl. But beneath it, I saw something else. Desperation. For the first time, she was the one who looked cornered. I stepped closer, meeting her glare head-on. "You can lie to everyone else, Margaret. But you can't lie to me. I know the truth. And soon, so will everyone else." For a moment, we stood there in the dark parking lot, two women locked in silent battle, neither willing to look away. Finally, she hissed, "You'll never win. You're too weak." I tightened my grip on my keys. "No, I'm a mother, and that makes me stronger than you'll ever be." I turned and got into my car, slamming the door shut, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. As I drove away, my heart raced, adrenaline surging through me. I had stared the devil in the eye and refused to back down. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the final strike. Margaret was too powerful, too cunning to go quietly. She would fight until her last breath to keep control. And so would I. Because this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about my son. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where lives are dismantled and rebuilt with a few strokes of a judge's pen. I sat at the long oak table, Rebecca at my side, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white. Across from me sat Daniel, stiff in his tailored suit, and beside him, Margaret. Her posture was perfect, her pearl earrings gleaming, her smile rehearsed for the audience she thought she still controlled. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted, sharp, calculating. And for the first time since I had met her, I saw something I never thought I'd see in Margaret Warner. Fear. The judge entered, and we all rose. My heart thundered in my chest as the proceedings began. Margaret's lawyer painted a picture of me as unstable, unfit, overwhelmed. They presented my small apartment as proof that I couldn't provide the environment a growing boy deserves. They even cited her connections in the community, neighbors who testified that she was the backbone of the family. Each word felt like a knife. But when they finished, Rebecca rose calmly, like a general who had been waiting for her moment to unleash the truth. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "this case is not about environment. It is not about who can afford the larger house or who wears the nicer clothes. It is about manipulation. It is about fraud. And it is about a grandmother who has abused her influence over her son and daughter-in-law to seize control that was never hers to begin with." Then she laid out the evidence. The debt letters, the forged repair documents, the pattern of coercion. My journal entries, recording every undermining remark, every moment Margaret had tried to strip me of my voice as a mother. The courtroom shifted, the energy tilting like a tide turning. Margaret's smile faltered, her fingers clenching around her pearl necklace. Rebecca's voice cut through the silence. Emily Warner was not unfit. She was silenced. Her own husband, under his mother's thumb, convinced her to sign away her rights, not to protect their family, but to shield his mother from financial ruin. That is not stability. That is fraud. The judge's gaze moved to me. "Mrs. Warner, do you wish to make a statement?" My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stand. My legs shook as I stepped forward, every eye in the room on me. I looked at the judge, then at Daniel, then finally at Margaret. "For years," I began, my voice trembling, "I believed the lie that being quiet, being agreeable, made me a good wife, a good daughter-in-law. I let myself be convinced that my voice didn't matter. But it does matter. Not for me, for my son. Because Lucas deserves to grow up in a home where love isn't conditional, where respect isn't withheld like a prize, where his feelings aren't mocked or dismissed." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. Margaret Warner doesn't want to raise Lucas because she loves him. She wants to raise him because she wants control. She took my home, my marriage, and tried to take my child. Not because I was unfit, but because she couldn't stand not being in charge. And Daniel, I turned to him, my voice breaking, you let her. You chose her control over our family. Over me. Over your own son. The room was silent. Daniel's face was pale, his eyes glassy, but he said nothing. Margaret stared at me with fury barely contained behind her painted smile. I turned back to the judge. I may not have the biggest house. I may not have the perfect marriage. But I have love. I have honesty. And I will never stop fighting for Lucas. Because that's what a mother does. My voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't look away. I stood tall, tears sliding down my cheeks, and let the truth hang in the air. The judge leaned back, thoughtful. Papers rustled. A gavel tapped against wood. When he spoke, his words felt like thunder. Custody of the minor, Lucas Warner, will remain with his mother, Emily Warner. The court finds no evidence of unfitness. Instead, there is clear evidence of undue influence and financial misconduct on the part of Margaret Warner. Effective immediately, she is barred from making legal or financial decisions on behalf of either her son or her grandson. The gavel struck again. Final. Irrevocable. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. My knees nearly buckled, but Rebecca's hand steadied me. Across the room, Margaret's mask shattered. Her face twisted in rage, her mouth opening as if to protest, but Daniel placed a trembling hand on her arm. For once, he didn't look like her soldier. He looked like a man realizing the empire he had let her build had just collapsed in front of everyone. I turned to leave, my heart pounding, my hands still shaking. And there he was, Lucas, waiting with a friend outside the courtroom, clutching his stuffed bunny, his wide eyes searching for me. "Mommy?" I knelt down, scooping him into my arms, tears spilling freely now. "Yes, baby." "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He buried his face in my shoulder, and in that moment, the courthouse, the battle, the years of manipulation, it all faded. All that mattered was him, warm and safe in my arms. As we walked out into the sunlight, Rebecca by my side, I knew the fight wasn't over forever. Margaret would always loom like a shadow. Daniel would always carry his scars. But the cycle had been broken. The chain had snapped. For the first time in years, the future felt like mine again, and as I buckled Lucas into his car seat, his small voice whispered, "Mommy strong." I smiled through my tears. Yes, baby. Mommy's strong, and I finally believed it.